Harvard has beat Trump yet again in court. This time, a federal judge rules in favor of Harvard and against Trump. Now, they basically have been a protracted battle with Trump ever since he took office, and his mission was to destroy elite universities. He demanded that Harvard change their curriculum, change their hiring practices because he wanted to get rid of diversity and, quote, woke ideology. Harvard refused, and then he tried to cancel $2.2 billion in federal funds. Harvard took him to court and won that. Now Trump sued them, saying that they were in violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act because of antisemitism. Well, the judge found that not to be the case. What was at stake was Trump was demanding Harvard pay them $1 billion in past grants and canceling future grants. My name is Dina Doll with the MeidasTouch Network. Let's get into this. Now, how we know this is not actually about civil rights or anti-Semitism is because they have told us. They have told us many times. In fact, Harvard quotes Trump specifically in the lawsuit about what this is really about. But let's look at J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, who, as we know, pretty much shortly after the midterms is going to be running for president to take Trump's place. Well, before he was senator and when he was still just an author, he said it in perhaps the most obvious, blatant way that now they have all said in perhaps quieter ways about how the attack on universities is central to this country, to this MAGA movement, to the Republicans. Take a listen.
But I've seen that those credentials can be really deranging, right? We shouldn't have a society where a kid who comes from a family like mine has to get a 4-year degree to have a middle-class life, has to go to Yale Law School to be taken seriously by the mainstream media. That's not fair. It happened to me. I've benefited from it, but I don't think that's the way that our country should actually work. And by the way, it deranges our entire population. What we've basically done is put this credential out there, a 4-year college degree. We've told everybody, if you want to have a prestigious job, if you want to be well respected by the culture, you've got to go and get this credential. And oh, by the way, you're going to get saddled with debt when you get this credential. And oh, by the way, you're going to be trained to hate your country and hate your family who made you who you are to get this credential. It's basically like we've created this trial that people have to run through, and that trial makes them worse people instead of better people. I actually think that we have to destroy the universities in this country. They get too much money. They have too much power. I don't think they do anything good. I believe that the university endowments in this country currently have $600 or $700 billion of wealth that they're managing.
What do they do with that? What is the point?
I wish that I knew. Right?
I think it's just to announce you have a $600 billion in endowments. I think that's it.
They're basically hedge funds with woke training grounds attached to them. That's what the universities are. Harvard University's endowment is $40 billion. That's bigger than many hedge funds. What do they do with that money? They use it to push our culture in a leftward direction. If we really want to get serious about countering the power of the left, the focus and the center of that power has to be the universities. I'm fine if people want to go to college. I'm fine if people want to get engineering degrees to do certain things, but we cannot have a successful society if we make these institutions that hate our country the gateway to a better life.
As J.D. Vance said, their number one goal is to destroy the universities in the country. Of course, he's not the only one who has said this. We have heard this in one manner, shape, or form for many. We've also seen Project 2025 successfully in that big, awful bill change the way that federal government grants loans to graduate schools. Project 2025 explicitly says it's because it delays people having families. Because if you're in graduate school, you're not having children as young. I mean, this is explicit in Project 2025, and it became the law by limiting the amount of money people can borrow for graduate school. Not because they wanted people to have less debt, but because they didn't want to have people go to school as long so they could have more babies. Before we get back to it, a word from someone who spent her career reading contracts. The fine print always matters, and nowhere is that more true than Medicare. Every plan is essentially a contract, and the differences hide in the details. which doctors, which prescriptions, what you actually pay when something goes wrong. Most people never get a fair walkthrough of those terms because many agents are paid more to place you in certain plans. That's a conflict of interest, and you deserve better than a conflicted advisor. That's why I like Chapter. They're the only Medicare advisor that compares every plan nationwide, and they're honest, not paid to steer you toward any particular one. They'll translate the fine print into plain English, and if your current plan is the right fit, they'll tell you so. It's free, it takes under 20 minutes, and they've saved people an average of $1,100 a year. If you're on Medicare or turning 65 soon, get a real second opinion. Call Chapter at 928-683-7766. That's 928-683-7766. Harvard was able to successfully win in court because the facts are so bad for Trump. They tried to claim that this was about civil rights and specifically anti-Semitism. And the judge found that there were some cases of actual anti-Semitism, but they were sporadic. They were isolated. Harvard makes a point in their filing talking about all the things they have done in order to protect their Jewish students, which of course is important. Also to note though is it seems as if Trump is only focused on anti-Semitism, and that in itself makes schools only focus on anti-Semitism, despite the fact that many students of Arab or Muslim descent have also faced discrimination in the colleges, or never mind just protesters that were pro-Palestinian that faced consequences, very serious consequences. This is how you know it's not actually about the students. It's not about the fact that no student should be discriminated against, because not only there are not enough facts about very real anti-Semitism, but because Trump isn't caring about overall discrimination happening on campus. Now, Harvard went ahead in their filing and quoted Trump. I've said this before. Trump is his own worst evidence because he says the things that blatantly show it's not actually about whatever lawsuit he plans on filing. They say in their thing, this is the quote from the filing, it publicly acknowledged, the government, that its actions are in response to Harvard's rejections of its various demands to impose government control over curriculum, hiring, and governance, Harvard's decision to defend itself in court, and Harvard's refusal to settle on the government's terms. And then they quote Trump himself. President Trump has repeatedly expressed this. Everyone knows that Harvard has lost its way. Harvard has been hiring almost all woke radical left idiots and bird brains. Harvard is a joke and should no longer receive federal funds. So there you go. Trump basically saying that this is not about discrimination against the students. Shock, not shock. But this is about punishing Harvard because, as J.D. Vance says, universities are destroying the country, but also punishing Harvard because it's not literally changing its curriculum in a way that Trump wants. Now, of course, this is also not just about Trump and J.D. Vance. Hegseth says something similar about military recruitment from universities like Harvard. Take a listen.
It's been poisoned from within by a class of so-called elite universities who've abused their privilege and access to this department and utterly betrayed their purpose. For decades, the Ivy League and similar institutions have gorged themselves on a trust fund of American taxpayer dollars, only to become factories of anti-American resentment and military disdain. They've taken our best and brightest, the men and women who pledged their lives to this nation, and subjected them to a curriculum of contempt. They've replaced the study of victory and pragmatic realism with the promotion of wokeness and weakness.
The attack on higher education is not a mistake because the more educated we are, the more exposed we are to history, the less likely we are going to support Trump and MAGA and Project 2025, which is why it is so important that Harvard continue to fight back and wins, and yet another big win in court. Because it's also not a mistake that Trump keeps on going after Harvard and the elite universities, not just because the elite universities are the only ones that are a threat to them, but because as they go, so does the rest of the colleges across the country. And so the fight for freedom of expression, the fight to be able to educate ourselves and those around us begins and ends with Harvard. And Trump knows that, and that's why he keeps going after them. Yet another big win for Harvard. Freedom of speech, freedom of integrity, freedom of education. My name is Dina Doll. If you haven't yet subscribed to the MeidasTouch Network, be sure to do that. If you haven't found the Mistrial podcast, wherever you listen to audio, please do that. Like, comment, share the audio podcast. It really helps. And of course, please check out the Mistrial sponsors in the link below. So grateful for my sponsors because they do not censor what I have to say, which is so important in this moment.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.